Hello, I think I'm live. Hi everyone, whoever shows up. If not, this will be available as a recording. I really enjoyed my first live, so I thought I would do these more often. And I'm also looking to, as I run this more often, I'm also looking to include various different topics as part of these lives. And I'll also be doing another live next week with my dear friend and colleague, Dr. Sonali Deepika, so look out for that as well. But I thought at this live I would talk about, and I did post this yesterday, so I'm going to talk about energy protection and boundary setting for highly sensitive and empathic people. I know this was one of the requests I received when I asked what topic would be great to speak on, and I think this is something that I have dealt with for very many years, especially when I didn't understand that I was a highly sensitive and empathic person. And I know that this is an ongoing learning curve for many of us, and thought it was a good topic to share and speak on and see if anything lights up in you as I'm speaking of this. So I'm going to start. So firstly, just to give a structure of this for this live, I'm going to be talking about the main difference between being a highly sensitive person and an empathic person. I'm also going to talk about what is protection, why do we need it, what are boundaries, what are the two different types of boundaries, and also specifically cover some information on what is negative energy. We talk about negative energy so much, but we don't understand what negative energy is, and thereby we don't understand when and how to put our boundaries in place for that. And lastly, some tips on how to monitor, maintain and nurture ourselves with healthy boundaries in place. So now before I get started, I'm going to presume that whoever is going to join or watch this later is someone who's highly sensitive or is empathic in nature. Now, I did not know the difference between the two. Hi, Aparna. So, I didn't know the difference between being a highly sensitive person and an empathic person. Now, an American psychologist named Elaine Aron started researching on sensitivity in the 1990s, in 1991. And she's still continuing to research on this very topic of sensitivity. And she came up with the main difference between being highly sensitive and being empathic. So highly sensitive person is very porous to their physical environment. That is, they're highly sensitive to noise, smell, touch, etc. And an empathic person, that person takes it one step further. Not only are they highly sensitive to their physical environment, but they're very sensitive to the emotional and energetic environment as well. So an empathic person can also feel the emotions of another person, can also take on the emotions of other people, places and things, whatever they come in contact with. So that is the main difference between being highly sensitive and empathic. And I believe that there are less than 20%, 15 or 20% of people who are highly sensitive, and a smaller portion of that are empathetic in nature. And I know that I am one of this, and it took me a long time to actually understand my sensitivity and make peace with my sensitivity, and then to learn to honor it for what it really is. I used to think that it was a weakness and it was stopping me from being a full expression of who I am in this life, but over the years I've learned to see that this is actually a superpower. Also, I do believe that each one of us are sensitive naturally. It's just that this group is a little bit more sensitive than the rest of us. And for that reason, we need to be aware of how to actually look after ourselves in the process of being sensitive. So, the topic of boundaries and energy protection. Firstly, I want to talk about what is protection and why do we need it. Firstly, we need protection, or we need boundaries, because what happens is that unconsciously and very often we feel depleted of energy, we feel drained, we feel sucked out of our life force energy. And often we don't know why this is the case. And this is why it's important to understand, what are we protecting? We're protecting our life force energy. And how do we know that we are not functioning at our full capacity? Is when we are depleted and we're drained of this energy. When we're drained of this energy, we are completely out of balance. And this has a ripple effect in our everyday life, how we show up in our personal life and how we show up in our professional life. So, what happens when we are not at full capacity, when we're not operating at full capacity because we're drained by leaking energy everywhere, because we don't have clear boundaries set in place? A few things is, firstly, we become vulnerable, extremely vulnerable, particularly to lower vibrational energies. And when I speak of lower vibrational energies, I'm speaking of energies that actually will drain us further. Not only are we already drained, but if we find ourselves around people, places, and things that already have a lower vibrational energy, we will tend to pick up more of that in our bodies. And it's also, the other thing is that we become extremely irritated and frustrated, and often we don't even know why. We think it's the other person or something's wrong in our life, but it's really because we are not centered in our body and we are running out of fuel, life force energy, and that is why we feel frustrated and irritated with whatever is going on. And we cannot regulate our emotions and feelings in that state, and so we lose clarity and we become indecisive in the process as well. Now, how does depletion and feeling drained show up in our energy? So, as empaths, it's very important to understand this, because what happens is, this is why when we don't understand this, this is why we make excuses or feel guilty. And the very fact that we make excuses and feel guilty is important to know, because this is what actually needs the most attention in the moment. Now, depletion, feeling drained, what does it feel like? It feels like, it shows up like not wanting to get out of bed, not wanting to see anybody, talk to anybody, just wanting to hide in our little cocoon. We also experience brain fog. We are unable to make clear decisions. We don't know what we want. We feel out of sorts. We feel uneasy in the body. We can also feel lethargic, no doubt, but also there's a kind of numbness in the body because we disassociate from the body, because we actually don't want to feel the depletion. And so we step out of our body energetically. We become forgetful, and we either overeat or we don't eat at all, because we don't have a clear sense, because we're not in our body. Also, what happens is we can actually feel, when we eat something that is not good for us, we feel bloated or inflamed. We can also feel like that in our energy. We can feel for lack of a better word, big or fat in our body, and it's not really the body that's bloated, it's our energy that's feeling inflamed. And In worst case scenario, and this has happened to me a couple of times, not couple, actually more than a couple of times, and this is where I learned my biggest lesson, is that what happens is when you're not aware of that you're already depleted and drained, and you continue to proceed in the same way without putting clear boundaries, you can also have this deep trembling sensation in the body that's not external but internal, almost like you're going to fall sick or you're coming down with a temperature, but actually you're not sick. And this is a scary place to be, because you actually don't know what's wrong, and it's not a physical symptom, it's an energetic symptom. So these are my own personal experiences and experiences for my clients when we feel drained or energetically depleted. But the thing here is that all our bodies are different. And that means that we have to get a little bit more aware of how our own body reacts when we are tired, when we're drained, when we're depleted of vital force energy. So these examples may be valid to you, all of them, some of them, none of them, but they may be something that's unique for your own body, and it's important to learn what that is for yourself, and to remember when you get to that place that something needs to change in that moment. Okay, so now talking about negative energy, this is a very important topic and a special topic for me, because we throw out this idea of negativity and negative energy, and we all have this different ideas of what this negative energy is. And it's not clearly defined for any of us, and I think that we have a lot of presumptions about what negative energy is. And I just wanted to dive a little bit into this now. Firstly, positive energy is anything that inspires, anything that expands, anything that empowers, radiates, expands, opens, deepens, nourishes our body, our mind, body, and spirit. And we know positive energy because we can feel it in our bodies. So if that is positive energy, the opposite, hi Mel, the opposite of positive energy is negative energy. And negative energy, it drains us, it contracts us. Our body language changes to being more closed up. It weakens us, it saddens us, we get depressed, and we feel very off. Now, negative energy doesn't have a source of its own. And so this is why negative energy always takes more than it gives. And it's always looking for its polar opposite, which is positivity, which is positive energy. And so that is positive and negative energy. And these are polar opposites, and they are the vital force of this duality of life. We need both. We need positivity and we need negativity. And a good example of how to explain this is that, say you walk into a dark room. It's completely dark. You cannot see anything. Let's assume that that's negative energy. Now, when you light a candle or you put on the light fills the room up. Let's say that's positive energy. Now, the positive energy is able to be present only because it had the container of darkness or negativity or negative energy holding it. So here's the thing. We do need both positive and negative, polar opposites, and negativity has a purpose of its own. And its purpose is to actually be the container for positive energy. When it's just a container with clear boundaries and it doesn't infiltrate the positive energy or take life out of the positive energy, it serves its purpose. Because without darkness, there is no light in this world. And you will see this positive and negative forces and energy everywhere, not just in our life. Every single aspect of our entire existence relies on the positive and negative energy. So it's not about dismissing negative energy or saying like this is bad, I don't need it, because our life wouldn't exist, we wouldn't exist without negative energy. It's about clearly defining the role of negative energy and its purpose, and putting boundaries in place for it, because so that it has its own purpose. Now that we understand the role of this negative energy, it's about now setting boundaries. And I laugh because my own personal experiences with boundaries has been so touch and go. I mean, I've fallen flat on my face trying to understand what boundaries means. I have beaten my head against the wall trying to understand how to put these boundaries up. Sometimes they're so hard, sometimes they're not at all there, and it's just such a huge learning curve to understand what are these boundaries. So the nature of boundaries is basically two. One that is completely hard, solid, opaque, nothing can pass through it. That is a boundary that is an absolute no. No means no, nothing else. And with the this kind of boundary, it's basically situations where there's physical, emotional, or mental abuse. That's just basically a no means no. The other kind of boundary is more semi-permeable. It is something that we deal with every day in our lives, and this kind of boundary is set in the moment as we go. Hi Roisin, how are you? Oh my god, so lovely to see you here. So I'm just talking about energy protection and setting boundaries as someone who's highly sensitive or empathic. So I'm talking right now about the two types of boundaries, and I just spoke about a clear, opaque, no means no kind of boundary, or yes means yes kind of boundary. And the other boundary is more semi-permeable, and it's something that we face and deal with almost every minute of our life. This kind of boundary is making decision as to whether it's a yes or no in the moment. And it can show up as in cases, for example, where it's like, oh, I need to eat, but I'm going to continue working. Or I know this is not good for me, but I still do it. Or another example is oh, I don't feel well, but I still want to go out. So these kind of situations and decisions we make actually impacts the way that we look after ourselves. And that's why setting a semi-permeable boundary in this moment actually helps us going forward. Now that we know that the two types of boundaries, or the nature of boundaries, there are actually 4 different types of boundary settings. One is physical boundary, mental, emotional, and spiritual boundaries. And this actually helped me with understanding what boundary needs to be put in place at any given time. Physical boundary is basically our physical space. Example, someone who is in our physical space, meaning they are very close to our physical space, especially that there's a saying where we say, you're in my face, which basically means that they're too close, and we don't want that. And I have a pet peeve that I don't share very often, especially with a physical boundary, is when we're walking on the street and say I'm with a friend, or if I'm walking alone and there are 2 people together walking in front of me, often what people would do is they would separate. If they're 2 together, whether it's a couple or 2 friends, they would often separate to allow me to walk in between them, which is actually an act of kindness. They're giving me way. But it really bothers me. And the reason it bothers me is because I actually do not walk into their energy bubble, because it not only impacts their energy bubble, it also impacts my energy. And this is becoming aware of our own physical space and also our own energetic space. And this is called physical boundary. I would rather have two people actually meet together and separate together so that I can walk, or move aside together so I can move forward. And I often also try and do the same thing. Often we're not aware of how our movements in our everyday life unconsciously actually impacts our energetic body. Hi Leah. Now the second type of boundary setting is mental boundaries. Mental boundaries is really impacts our thoughts and how we look after our mental activity. Now, in terms of mental boundaries, what happens is, look, we all go through ups and downs in life, and we often what happens is that when we're down, we're actually looking for support. And I have noticed that there's a subtle difference in, this is from my own personal experience, so especially when I'm down or feeling low or even depressed, there's a subtle difference in the way that I seek support. So the first one is when I'm actually needing someone to support me in the way that I'm actually looking for a portal to get through the depression, or someone to just maybe hold space for me. I'm not expecting too much in that state, but also I'm not looking to stay in that space. So which means that the person who's actually offering support doesn't feel depleted, but is present and is clear on how they are being present to me. The other side is when I'm really low and I'm actually not looking to get out of that space, not willing to do anything at all about it, and just wanting to, stay in it or even sulk in it. And I'm looking for someone to match that energy. And often someone who also can be in that same space so that I can feed with that person. No problem, Leah. Thank you. So the thing is that when we are actually supporting someone who's low, we have to be very, very mindful of how much we're willing to give in the moment, and how we're nurturing ourselves in that process, in the process of giving and being present. Compassion is very important at this time. Compassion not only for the person we are offering support to, but also compassion for ourselves. And to be very, very aware of the subtle energetic shift in that, when there is someone who's actually seeking support without draining you, and when there's someone seeking support with the intention of bringing your energy to match theirs. And when you can actually identify these two separate subtle energetic differences, it becomes easier to decide in the moment how you want to navigate and what kind of boundaries you want to set in place. Now, emotional boundaries. Emotional boundaries, this is a big one, because as empathic people, what we tend to do mostly is we actually tend to take on the emotions of people in our lives, especially our loved ones, and even people we don't know often. I know a friend of mine, just maybe a few weeks ago, heard that her dear friend had lost someone close in her life, and she was feeling the grief. But there's a difference here again. Feeling the grief for a dear friend versus actually grieving for them. That's where boundary setting comes into place. It is not our responsibility to make someone else's emotions ours. Yes, we can support them and feel for them, but not to process their energies through our body. And this is where an emotional boundary comes into place and becomes important. And the last type of boundary is spiritual boundary. Spiritual boundary is out of our three-dimensional physical reality and steps beyond that into different realms. And in saying that, this is where the realm of the fear of spirits and ghosts comes into being. And I know I used to be very afraid of them when I was younger, and now looking back, I think it's only because I didn't have clear boundaries. As I mentioned earlier, there's positive and negative everywhere, and so is the case even in different realms. So instead of being afraid and attracting energies that match the fear, we can be a little bit more conscious on how to set clear boundaries so that we're no longer afraid of that other dimensional aspect, but become more clear in what we'd like to attract in the process. And so this is where the spiritual boundary becomes important. Now that we covered various different types of boundaries, this is all a heady, conversational, conceptual kind of update, but at the end of the day, all of this needs to be put into practice. And this is when the true art of protection and boundary setting comes into being. Now, setting boundaries, firstly, the first key ingredient to setting boundaries is to become absolutely incredibly intimate with our body and our sensations and our feelings and our emotions. This is paramount, because if we don't understand how we're feeling or what we're experiencing, and we're not present in our bodies, we're never going to know what is needed in terms of what kind of protection or what kind of boundary setting needs to take place. So there's another aspect to it. The more deeply intimate we become with our own body, with our own feelings, with our own sensations, with our own emotions, it actually opens the door and a gateway to build that same kind of deep intimacy with another, whether that's your partner or your loved ones, your family, friends, etc. So there's actually a beautiful dance in the way that you actually become more intimate with your body, you bring forth that same intimacy in your external world with the people you interact with. And the other aspect of this boundary setting is absolute honesty and integrity with yourself. Not with anybody else, but with yourself. So when I say this, when I say absolute honesty, is that as long as you are being honest with yourself about how you feel, what sensations and what's happening within you, you can never be honest with someone else, and thereby creating distrust in the process. So if you're not honest with what's happening with you, what your needs are, what your wants are, then you cannot be honest with another person. And in that also means that you cannot actually set clear energetic boundaries. You cannot be aware of what you also actually need if you're not being honest with yourself. So authenticity, honesty, and integrity in the moment is absolutely necessary and needed as part of learning to set clear boundaries for yourself. And in my own journey of setting boundaries and learning how to say no when needed and saying yes when I need it, what I have learned is that setting boundaries is really about honoring and accepting and realizing your worth. It's really about how worthy do you feel to live this life fully being present to yourself and to your needs and to your wants. And when you are able to come from that place, imagine how beautifully and wholly you can show up to serve another. So I think that this is pretty much what I wanted to share as part of this live. And you know, in my own experience, I have learned more and more about being aware of what I need in the moment, and also learning to say yes and no in the moment. But it's a lifelong journey, and it's also about not being hard on ourselves, not aiming for perfection in this process, and also when we become more aware, we're also aware of when we're not actually honoring ourselves. And that's also a beautiful place to be in, because the more we know where we're not honoring ourselves, the more we will start to actually take the steps needed to begin to honor ourselves. So in order to basically end this live, I would like to say that, you know, if you're actually interested in, I mean, I've spoken so much, but as I said, it's all a concept. It's all up in the head unless we actually put it into practice in our own body and in our own lives, in our own situations that we meet. And so if you're ever ready to learn to honor yourself, learn to understand your worth, and wanting to learn and explore how you can be aware of your body, be aware of what your needs and wants are in the moment, and then find the right words and energetic presence to share that with people with clarity, then you're welcome to work with me one-on-one. I do offer one-on-one sessions for these very situations that we find ourselves in and we don't know how to navigate, because we actually don't know that many people who are clear about what boundary setting is, what's negative energy, how can we look after ourselves, why do we need to look after ourselves, why do we need protection, etc. Hi sweetie, how are you? Thank you for joining. Actually, I'm just ending the live now, but I will save the recording so that you can listen to it later. But this is pretty much the end of my life. I hope you find this valuable. And if you have any questions or feedback, please feel free to share. And I wish you a good day, a good evening, and good afternoon wherever you are in the world watching this. Thank you so much, and take care. Bye bye.